There we go. I think I found it. Well, that pretty much makes 6:30 on our time, so we might as well get underway. We might have a couple more come through, but thank you all for returning to us, and those that are new to coming to our events. It's always great to have you guys on board, and we always have a lot of fun doing it. Showing you a couple of new experiences with wines that we're always pretty proud of ourselves finding. So this is good. Today we're discovering a couple of Georgian wines, which personally I haven't drunk too many of these, but I've learned over the past couple of years that they can be quite exciting and different, and I love to have them over sort of the either autumn or spring sort of time. So this is sort of the perfect timing to get into these. We've got Mark coming on board shortly with us. He's just wrapping up a meeting over in with a couple of our champagne producers over in France. Lucky him. And obviously I'm his right-hand man as wine buyer here at United Cellars as well, helping out source out these wines. Then we've also got Andrea Pritzker, who is our Master of Wine located here in Australia. She'll be guiding us through the wines this evening and talking all about how these fantastic wines are produced. Some very interesting concepts that are coming out, and even some of the political influences that are happening at the moment, revolving around these wines anyhow. So one other thing to add is we have got our interactive Wheel of Wine going on again. We always love doing this, and we love to try and get you guys involved at any stage. After each wine, we'll have a nice question that comes up. Just text in your name, email, and answer to the number on your screen at the moment. We will show it a little bit later. It's 0419 001 858. That'll come up in my inbox, and I'll make sure that you get an entry into the draw if you get the answer incorrect, and 3 correct entries if you do get the answer right. So it always pays to play. The prize today is a $50 wine credit towards your next order. You're all great members of ours, so I'm sure you'll put that to good use. So let's start off with the map of Georgia. In the northern side of Georgia, we've got Rome and Grainsville. At the central, we've got Roswell, Atlanta, Lexington. No, I'm just kidding. This is the wrong Georgia that we're talking about at the moment. I'll hand over to Andrea, who will guide you through the real Georgia that we're going to discuss today.
Thanks very much, Michael. Yes, that could have ended up being a webinar on the fine muscadine grape, which is what Georgia in the US is known for. But tonight, actually, we're in for a better round of wines and a lot more complexity than what the muscadine offers in Georgia. Welcome, everyone. It's great to be here with you this evening. This is the United Cellars' first Georgian wine tasting. We hope that it will be one of many, because there's a lot of ground to cover in Georgia. And I really welcome your feedback. And if you've got questions, feel free to unmute yourself or throw something in the chat if you're more comfortable doing that. And I'll try and address them as we go along. And you can see from this map that the Republic of Georgia it has many different wine regions. But just to give you a context as to where the Republic of Georgia actually sits, this is at the intersection of Eastern Europe and Western Asia. So Georgia actually has the Black Sea on the west side as a border. Then it has Russia on the northern and eastern side. And it also borders Turkey, Armenia, and Azerbaijan towards the south. So this area has been at the crossroads of civilization for millennia, and it has already a very rich history in terms of wine production. Really, wine sits at the heart of culture and civilization in Georgia. And in fact, even the coat of arms has someone holding a bowl of wine as part of their emblem. So wine has always been very, very important piece in Georgia. And in fact, the topography of the region allows for wine growing across the entire country. So you can see from this map that there are many different wine regions, but the vast majority of production is actually centered in the southeast, in this region in the light green called Kakheti. So this particular region is responsible for most of the wines that we see on export markets, but also the vast majority of production in Georgia itself. In terms of the climate and viticulture, you've got a wide range of climates from sort of semi-continental in Kakheti through to quite alpine in the north with the Caucasus Mountains. And those are really important sort of barrier for the really cold air that would normally come from Russia. So this part of the world has perfect climate for wine growing, and that's why we see so many different regions and so many different grape varieties, as we're about to discover.
Yeah, that's great. Most of the wines that all the wines that we're going to be showcasing today do come out of that southeastern region, which is Kakheti. So it's a good showcase of the versatility that that region actually has to offer today. Hand over to you, Andrea.
So Georgian wine, this seems to be something that's everywhere at the moment. So Georgian wine is really, really popular in on-premise, so on restaurant wine lists. It's sort of the darling of a lot of the sommeliers in Australia and around the world. And part of that is because it's such an intriguing story. So there's a very rich history of wine growing, wine making in Georgia that dates back over 8,000 years. And in fact, they've found wine presses, wine knives, and even clay pottery dating back to that. So really, Georgia is the birthplace of wine, and that's been quite a remarkable story in and of itself. In more recent history, of course, Georgia was part of the Soviet Union in the 20th century and was really responsible for producing mass volume of wine for the Russian or Soviet market. And it was really only since 1991, when Georgia gained its independence from Russia, that a new kind of wine scene began to emerge with a bigger emphasis on smaller producers, more artisanal producers, and moving away from volume producers. So that's been part of the story. The other really exciting thing that has captured the world's attention are all these unique grape varieties. And it's still being counted, but there's well over 430 unique grape varieties in Georgia itself. And probably only about 38 to 40 are actually in commercial production at the moment. So there's this rich treasure trove of grape varieties that are yet to be explored and enjoyed and commercialized. And that's very exciting to people sort of seeking new adventures in wine. There's another also very interesting phenomenon, which we'll talk about a little bit more in detail later, but there are quavery, which are basically large clay pots or fermenting vessels that are used traditionally in Georgia. They have been used since ancient times to produce wine, and this practice has been resurrected in more recent times. And we're going to look at a wine that has been made in a quavery and see some of the impact that that has on the texture and the aromas and flavors of that wine. If you think that you've seen sort of a good selection of Georgian wine, I assure you that there's way more to discover than what you could possibly find on our shores at the moment. Georgian wine are produced in a variety of styles, including sparkling. They're making pet nat styles, white, red, rosé, and also a huge amount of sweet white and sweet red and semi-sweet wines as well, which actually are the vast majority of production in the country. Most of what we see on export markets is the dry styles. That's where our sweet spots hits in terms of what we prefer to drink. But actually what the Georgians drink themselves and often what they export to other markets are the sweeter styles.
Yeah, great. And I think we found, like, when I was hunting around for a few of these, most of them that are available, I couldn't even find a sweet Georgian wine on our shores. And actually, I found that most of them were amber wines, which is very interesting, and we'll talk about a bit after, which is something that's becoming a little bit trendy that we've noticed here in Australia, is that people are going for these quite funky sort of alternate sort of styles of wine. So it's really interesting to find a couple of international ones and see what they're doing. It's a little bit different to us. I've added a couple of images here of some of the Qvevri that they're actually using to ferment these wines. Really, really interesting. They are submerged. If we go back to the last post, I believe that those those circles that are on the floor there, that's actually the top of the pots that they're fermenting these wines in. I was actually curious. Do you know how they get that out, Andrea?
Well, it's not easy, put it that way. But yeah, I mean, I think the reason that they bury them actually is so that they can ferment at a really nice, even ambient temperature for a long period of time. And this is a very ancient practice. So being buried in the ground gives you a really consistent temperature. And then to bring the wines up and out is a pretty interesting process. So lots of labor involved, and it's it's a really ancient method that's been resurrected. So it's fantastic to see that happening.
Yeah, certainly very interesting, that's for sure. We might head into the first wine then, if that's all right, Andrea, if you can lead us through this one.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is our first white, and I regret that I do not have my glass in front of me. All of you managed to get your wines, and my wines, most unfortunately, have been stuck somewhere between the United Cellars warehouse and my house, which isn't that far.
We got wines to Melbourne quicker than your place, Andrea.
I look forward to receiving my wines. And actually what I thought I'd do is when I do get them, I'll add my tasting notes to the Georgian Wine blog, which I've written, which is now on the United Cellars website. So you can see my take on them, but I am going to be very interested in your take. But our very first wine actually comes from a region called Emiretti, which Michael, if you flip back to the map, I'll just briefly outline. So Emiretti is the other region in green, which is located more to the central west of Georgia. And here we have a grape variety called Atsitska. Atsitska is a beautiful white variety, quite high in acidity, and it can be made into sparkling wine. But it's got beautiful large bunches. It's very easy to grow. It's quite vigorous. And the style of wine that it generally makes is quite crisp, quite fresh, and has a beautiful sort of delicate aroma, sometimes of apples and white flowers and of honey. This particular producer has got just a small amount of land, 1.5 hectares, but quite high elevation, so 300 meters above sea level. And that's really ideal for retaining the acidity in these grapes. This particular wine, I think, should be, from my reading of it, and I regret I don't have it in front of me, is, crisp, lively, fresh, some green notes, some lime, lemon curd, and perhaps a little bit of nuttiness. So I would really like to hear some feedback from you out there who actually have this wine to enjoy, because of the three wines, it's the only one I've never tried before. So I'm also kind of weeping that I don't have that chance.
We might pick on someone here. How about we get the Nybergs jumping in? What do you guys reckon about the wines for the wine number one?
Oh yeah.
I agree. I think it's very fresh, acidity, that lime, and for me, I get the apples, green apples.
Green apple, yeah,
right? And yeah, very nice wine. A little bit different, very nice, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the thing with Georgian wine, is that because they are using indigenous grape varieties and sometimes more traditional techniques, you often see a little bit more savoriness or sort of distinctiveness in the wines compared to what you would expect from, other varieties in our New World countries like Australia, California, Chile, etc. But I think it's the texture as well as that sort of aromatic complexity that makes these wines so unique. Does anyone else have any comments out there about that particular wine?
Might pick on you, Pete. What are your thoughts, mate?
Yep. the complexity of this thing was the thing that struck me. And I thought at first there must be like quite a few different grapes happening there to make it to make that complexity. But I do understand it is just coming from this grape and maybe the winemaking. But really the savory thing is the thing that stands out for me. And I'm struck by how quickly it hits your palate and tongue. I mean, you've hardly put it in your mouth and you know there's a lot going on. So very interesting wine. I like it a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. I get it real nice and streamlined, uplifting, zesty, bit of a lemon curd in there. I get a tiny bit of like nutmeg spice, which is quite interesting. Just a tiny little bit of it. And I think in the next wine, you'll see that's just absolutely amplified tenfold anyways. But yeah, really cool. I'd be interested to hear from you, Andrea, because these quaveries that they ferment the wines in, what impact does that actually do to the wine as a final product?
Well, it really depends on how long they spend in the quavery, and that length of time will really change the structure and the aromatic complexity of the wine. And I think we're going to see that with our second wine being so different from the first. But quavery, I think, being clay, you get almost more of like a mineral finish to the wine, rather than if wines are fermented in stainless steel, you tend to get kind of a almost sometimes crisp, almost tinny kind of finish. And with oak fermented wines, you tend to get a almost dusty kind of finish. So the clay quavery really help to kind of change the textural component of the finish in particular. And then with any kind of skin contact that the producer might be choosing to do, they're actually picking up, you know, what we call phenolics, and that's there's a sort of grippiness that you might encounter texturally with the wine. So it will also change some of the aromatics and flavors, but that will depend very much on the length of time.
Yeah, for sure. I assume that's because clay is quite porous as well, and obviously comes from the earth. So yeah, interesting.
Yeah,
interesting.
there's a little bit of oxygen ingress, but also it just changes the textural quality of the wine in terms of how you perceive it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. I like it. Cool. Well, on that note, we might head into question number 1 for this evening. So get your phones at your fingertips. Anyone that is around a table, you're all welcome to play. Just leave your name, email, and the answer to the question here. So the question is, quavery wines are the calling card of Georgian wine. We've seen them come up quite often with any wines that reach our shores are essentially producing this method. What percentage of the total production is aged in quavery? Your phones are ready. It's 0419 001 858. I've better get up the dashboard here so I can see all your text messages coming in through. Let me know if it does change the screen. I don't want to reveal anyone's details here. That's still on the main slide there, Andrea.
Yes, I mean, they're a very big talking point, aren't they, quavery?
Well, it's just interesting, isn't it? It's like, you know, you've got the likes of Yangara Estate down in McLaren Vale and a couple of other producers that are doing sort of more above ground ceramic eggs and such to produce some different wines. And you can really feel the effort that they put into those wines. That's why we've been big advocates for their brand and their winery for such a long time, pretty much since they started. You know, we've been big fans of theirs. So it's interesting to see alternate styles of winemaking and the fermentation, where they actually have the fermentation process rather than just the vinification of the wines and vineyard management. It's really interesting. Right, I've got a couple of answers coming in now, which is great. Hopefully.
Some right answers.
There's a couple that come through that I think they've got it. I don't think they've got it. I know they've got it. Let's have a look. I'll just wait a couple more minutes to get a few more coming through. It's interesting. These are big numbers. I got Mark to do these questions as well. So we were completely blind going into this, Andrea, but I don't know the answer. Well, I do know now. I don't know the answer until I actually hit the slide, but I did see the questions earlier, which is great. All right, got a couple coming through now. Great, just give it another 30 seconds or so. I can see there's about 4, we've got 6. Let's give it another minute. Very good. If you were going to have a punt on this, Andrea, what would you say?
Well, I do know
Going
the
in blind. I know you know the answer, but going in blind, I know that you just found out the answer now too.
Go for something like, yeah, like 3, you know, given how much people talk about quavery.
Yeah, I know. It's a big one. All right, that's pretty good to us. So the answer is actually answer number 1 at 1%.
1%
of all production, which is quite interesting, actually. I mean, the vessels are quite small, so I understand that. But yeah, I suppose it's because most of the production's going over to Russia, and they're probably done in stainless steel tanks, and they're creating a different product for the rest of the world, right?
Totally.
Interesting.
I mean, how many of those would you have to supply that market, right?
Oh gosh, they're not big, are they? Great. Well, we'll move on to wine number 2 now. As I was saying, this is our other assistant buyer, Michael Morgan, who also shares my name. He absolutely loves this wine. Introduced me to it pretty much from the start of me being in this business. We've had a couple of these bottles in the past, and it's genuinely a summer favorite for ours. We import it every single year, and we're a big fan of this. So I'll pass it over to you to have a bit of a chat about this wine, Andrea.
Thanks, Michael. And I can see the color of that wine. I think it's Jennifer and David have their glasses right in front of the screen, which is quite helpful. And you can see that beautiful orange color. Yeah, thanks, Chris. And indeed, this wine is a what's called a full-bodied orange wine. And I'm sure many of you have heard that term before. Many of you have probably enjoyed orange wines before. But basically, orange wines are wines that have been fermented on their skins. They're white grape varieties that have been made in some ways like a red wine, where the fermentation has taken place on its skins. To add further complexity to this wine, it's also been fermented in a quavery. And so you have, for quite a period of time, so you have a huge amount of skin contact from 3 weeks, really, really kind of extracting a lot of aromas and flavors that are unique to this grape variety. And this particular grape variety is Svani. So bear with me while I grab my piece of paper, because I had some really lovely notes about that. And this is a very famous producer as well. So Pheasant's Tears was probably one of the first wines to be widely exported around the world. And indeed, it has actually shown up on the Master of Wine exam as well. So it's kind of one of those wines that you're expected to know if you have a wide body of knowledge about wine. And this producer is quite a sort of archetypal producer. So Mizvane is a grape variety. It's light skinned. It actually means green from Kakheti in the Georgian language. And it has, you know, a lot of crisp citrus aromas and flavors. Sometimes it can get pineapple or pear characters. But when it's fermented, as this one is in quavery, you see more of the dried fruit characters. So dried apricot, raisin, sultana, figs, but also orange skin and maybe some of those tropical notes, but more in the dried spectrum. So it's dried passion fruit, dried pineapple. I'd also be really curious to find out from you what you think about the texture and weight of this wine.
Yeah, great. Again, we might jump to someone a little bit different. I just love the spices that come out of this one. I don't have it in front of me. I've got number one in front of me at the moment, but yeah, I absolutely love it. We might go over to the table of Alison and John, if you wouldn't mind sharing your thoughts on wine number 2.
Go yours. Go. Good. I'm not normally an orange wine fan. This one I quite like. Got a bit of sort of barnyard in it, a bit of real earthiness on the nose. And a real kind of spiciness on the palate. Very nice.
And we're having it with cheese and muscatels. It's going really well with the muscatels.
Oh,
So
yeah.
muscatels and quince paste and stuff up. It just complements, brings out the fruit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's a really important point, is that when you try these wines without food, they can be quite confronting, and there are a lot of wild or funky aromas and flavors, and barnyard can be one of them, which could be from a little bit of Brettanomyces creeping in there, which is a spoilage yeast. A little bit of that is often found in some of the top wines of the world, so that kind of barnyard silage character is tolerated as long as it doesn't get out of hand, but also more of this sort of smoky, spicy notes, which you wouldn't normally associate with a dry white wine. So when you've got that kind of array of aromas and flavors, it really pays to have some beautiful food. And interesting that you pointed out that sort of the muscatel kind of grapes with the real sweet, bright, vibrant kind of flavors matching off against those sort of more savory, smoky notes. I think that would be a very big winner.
Yeah, I kind of have to agree. I actually, going into this, I always thought that this was quite a polarizing wine. You know, people either love this or hate it. If you spoke with Mark, he's sort of on the fence. He's not the biggest fan of his orange whites, but he likes this one. So we've managed to sway him over and put this in the portfolio, which is good.
I
Pete,
think that's actually a really important point, Michael. Just sorry to interrupt you there, but that what Alison said too is that, you know, she doesn't usually like orange wines, but she quite likes this one. And I think that's the thing with orange wines, is they're all very, very different from each other, and they have some similarities because that skin contact will provide a certain framework of aromas and flavors, but after that they really do differentiate. So you can get better and worse balance, more or less funky, and a whole variety of color as well in orange wine.
yeah, they can certainly be a lot of fun. I see, Pete, you had your hand up there.
Yeah, I hate being controversial, but I find this wine undrinkable.
Yep.
I'm getting hospital smells out of it. I don't know what it is. I have drunk a few other orange wines, and I agree, Andrea, they're all sort of somehow different. But I think I must be alone tonight, but I just find this undrinkable.
You're either alone or others are quiet there, Pete, but because we knew that this was quite a polarizing wine. I had an orange wine just the other day that I personally thought smelled like swimming pool from when I was younger.
Yeah.
And, you know, obviously sometimes interesting characters in wines can either be favorable or not. And it's all quite subjective, you know, at the end of the day, when you look at it, do you like oysters or not? I think most wine drinkers like oysters, but it's still another one of those sort of polarizing foods that, you know, there's a lot of people in the world that don't, which is interesting. I think you had something to say, did you, Andrea? Or?
Yeah, just, I mean, that sort of hospital smell, Band-Aid smell, that can be derived from Brettanomyces as well, which is a spoilage yeast. So sometimes you get a sort of cowpat, sometimes you get more almost antiseptic Band-Aid character. So that could be it, and you could be quite sensitive to it, which isn't a bad thing. Make a good winemaker if you were. So I think if it's not your thing, that's perfectly okay, because it is a very distinctive style, not everyone's cup of tea.
Actually, I've got another question that might relate to this. Our first two wines, all of them, have been corked. They don't seem to be using screw caps in Georgia. Since the wine is quite peculiar to begin with, do you get a bit of variation from one bottle to the next?
Or whenever you have wine sealed under cork, you can expect variation, and that will definitely advance as the wines age. So, at 10 years of age with 12 wines under cork, you'll have 12 different wines completely. So that is one of the issues with cork. The main reason that Georgia would be using cork is really tradition and also export markets. The vast majority of their exports, when they're not going to Russia, although they're probably not going to Russia these days, and we'll be talking about that in a minute, they often go to the US market, and the US doesn't have a lot of affection for screw cap wine at the moment. So part of that sort of traditional image, part of that sort of rustic, natural image is using cork. I don't mind a good cork, but I really hate a bad one. So it's it's one of those dicey things with closures.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic that we've had numerous times, the old screw cap versus cork discussion for many years now. I mean, I've been in the industry now for about 10 years, and even over those 10 years, I've seen the evolution of technology in terms of testing facilities for corks. The price of corks is actually astronomical. It's one of the biggest bills that wineries do face. So it's really interesting that they still cater towards that. Screw caps are quite cheap, and they're actually more effective a lot of the time, especially here in Australia, where we're quite happy just to have screw cap. I was actually talking to a winemaker, Drew Tuckerville, in the Hunter Valley, who mentioned that, he loves putting his top tier wines under cork because he loves the romance behind it. I love cork as well. I think it's phenomenal. Nothing makes me feel more satisfied than really screwing into a nice, great cork and popping it and sharing it with a couple of friends around a dinner table or a cheese platter. And I personally like that, but it might be because I'm a little bit younger and I missed out on the cork days, but I do like good cork.
You haven't thrown as many wines down the sink as I have, Michael.
This is probably true. On the other side of things, I also like Brettanomyces in wine as well.
Yeah, so
some of them. So
it is a tolerance factor there for sure.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. All right. We might move on to a couple of notes on what orange wine is, since we've got one right in front of us, which is great. We've seen these rising in popularity over the last many years. More and more ad hoc labels are coming out that are orange wines that are sort of like trial labels, and these just seem to absolutely fly off the shelf, particularly with some of the millennials and younger generations. So it's really interesting to actually see what all the fuss is about and why people are going there. Do you want to talk a bit about orange wines, Andrea?
Yeah, sure. I think orange wines have kind of ridden the coattails of the natural wine movement in general. So the natural wine movement has really trumpeted the idea of minimal or no intervention in terms of making wine. That has captured the imagination of a good sector of the wine world, particularly perhaps a younger group of sommeliers who were more curious about what would happen if you didn't do as much in the winery or as little as possible. The orange color does come from skin context. So as I mentioned earlier, these are white wines that have been fermented with their skins. Normally white wines have their skins removed or pressed off and then fermented. So when you ferment with skins, you pick up tannin. And we don't usually talk about tannin in white wine, but for orange wines, they actually do have some tannin. I was just doing a little bit of homework before this session, and I found a paper that suggested that orange wines, depending on how long they're fermented on their skins, will probably have a tannin level similar to a light-bodied red wine. So they don't have as much tannin as red grapes in general, and they need to spend a lot longer on their skins to actually extract that. But when you do, you get these dried fruit characters, orange peel, floral notes, nutty notes coming through. And you see a wide range of color depending on the grape variety used, because even white grape varieties have different kind of slight tinges in their color of their skin. But also the length of time that those wines are macerated and fermented. So That's where you get the orange wine phenomenon in a tagline. And in fact, in the natural wine movement, they kind of categorize them as light orange, medium orange, full of bodied orange wine. So there's this huge sort of gradation, which is interesting to see.
Gee, that wasn't around when I sat my exam.
No, there's lots of new stuff happening, which is super exciting. And I think what's probably captured the imagination of a lot of people around the world is that these wines didn't exist in a sort of commercial way. I mean, there were small batches being produced for local, families for their own benefit or their own experimentation. But it was really only when the Italians, and particularly in Collio, started getting interested in making these more natural, minimal intervention wines that it really started to take off. And now if you go to a restaurant, you'll see often a subsection of the wine list with orange wines listed.
Yeah, for sure. I saw Jennifer and David New, your table had your hand up for a question or a comment. Please feel free to unmute and yell it out. We're always happy for you to get involved. Jump in.
It's on.
We were, no question, not a big fan of orange wines, but we need some education.
Yeah, great. Well, that's why we've got a Master of Wine on the panel tonight. Please fire away, ask all the questions you like.
Don't have any yet.
Ask if they're not under. Are these wines not under screw caps because of the cost of installing machinery, and they're evolving as an industry as small producers?
That's part of it. It's also part of their sort of ethos. They would consider screw cap to be too modern for the kind of image that they would like to project about Georgian wine. Now, I think that might change in the future, but at the moment they see cork as part of that returning to an older way of producing wine, away from technology and sort of modern winemaking. And it's also about export markets. There's a much bigger call for wines under cork. We have a very skewed vision here in Australia and in New Zealand about screw caps. We love them, we buy them, we don't question them, but other markets still do. And so, I think it's going to take another full generation before screw caps really take off globally. And that's not just for Georgian wine, but for all wines. In terms of your comment about really not being a huge fan, I also sometimes struggle with orange wine, depending on the producer and the style, because I sometimes think they're interesting and they're textural and they're grippy, but they're not necessarily. I love fresh aromatics in white wine in particular, and they don't always deliver that. They deliver something completely different. So it's almost about sort of setting aside your perspective on white wine and thinking of it as a completely different category.
Yeah, I think that's what I meant about re-education, in that I don't find what I'm looking for in the wine. So if I maybe I have to approach it differently, but to me they always seem like someone forgot to make them. Like it's like like they didn't finish it or something.
Some of them are a little bit like backyard experiments, aren't they?
Yes. They certainly are.
And I mean, I think you if you're not enjoying it, then it's not a good wine for you, put it that way. And I don't think you have to worry about like, I'm not educated or whatever. I think just,
well, you do have to worry, because now when you go to a restaurant, there's so many of them like it's almost fully orange wines or pet nats, and I think I'm finding that now.
Yes, that can be an issue, and I think that's kind of reflects what the sommeliers like to drink, but not necessarily bringing along the wine buying public at the same pace. And I was at a natural wine bar the other night with some more conventional wine friends of mine, and we had this exact conversation. So sometimes you can think, well, it's interesting, but do I really feel like drinking that particular wine tonight, or would I prefer something with a different profile?
I actually had this wine over Christmas with some gingerbread, and it was phenomenal. Just on the
Oh.
note, with it goes great with a great range of food.
I would really, and the other final point too, I think, is this wine will probably look completely different tomorrow. So if you still have some left, it would be worth pouring in another glass tomorrow or even the next day, because these wines actually have quite a bit of protection against oxygen, unlike other white wines. So you could actually keep it for a couple of days and just see how it evolves over time.
Okay, with gingerbread for
Yeah,
morning food.
I think that would be a really good match, actually, as Michael's already tried it.
It was actually brilliant. I think Alison and John had their hand up for something.
Oops.
Or was it? No? Oh, I think you're on mute.
I was giving a thumbs up to Andrea's view.
Oh, great. Great. Sounds good. All right, guys. Well, we might motor on along a little bit onto the second question for this evening. Is which European dictator was born in Georgia? Was it A, Hitler, B, Franco, or C, Stalin? And A, B, and C, please substitute that for 1, 2, and 3. Even if you say C, I'll still understand what it is when you message it through. I actually knew the answer to this straight off the bat, which is great. I was pretty proud about that. What would you have originally thought, Andrea? And what would your thought process go? How would your thought process go in trying to answer this question?
Yeah, my undergraduate degree was in European studies, so I had this kind of in the bag as well.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, when you think about who was where at that point in time, it kind of all makes sense.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I'll just quickly filter on through this. Geez, a couple of you actually got the first answer correct, which is great. Most of you got it wrong. There was actually, I tell a lie, there was only one that got the first answer correct, and well done to that person. I won't single anyone out. That's very good. Either a lucky guess or you got there. Let's have a look here. Very good. So Andrea, if you drank many of the orange wines, and you mentioned that they were put into the W set, and obviously there's new classifications to these. I mean, when I set my exam, it was essentially red wine, white wine. You've got pale lemon, straw, goes on. Never really had any amber wines that I had to, or orange wines that I had to analyze. What's been your experience in as an MW in the industry? Is this something that you guys have got a bit of a spotlight on, or what's sort of happening there?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And, you know, actually I was, when I did my MW exam, Georgian wines were just starting to kind of peak in terms of just becoming something worth looking at and worth knowing about. So I remember studying, but not really thinking that they would probably appear. And in fact, they didn't appear for another 2 years after I finished my exam. So it was about 2015, 2016 that they appeared on the exam. And by that point, there had been much more widespread export of Georgian wines. And in terms of Masters of Wine, or Lisa Granick, who's a Master of Wine, has written the definitive guide, The Wines of Georgia, which was published in 2019. So if you're keen to get the total story, Lisa is the absolute authority in this region. And there is also other MWs around the world, in the UK, working very closely with the Georgian producers to try and bring attention to their wine. So Sarah Abbott, Master of Wine, she does a lot of work in Georgia. Deborah Myberg, based in Hong Kong, doing a lot of work with Georgian wine as well. So Masters of Wine are very, very interested. There was a trip to Georgia a few years ago, didn't get on that one. And apparently it was absolutely phenomenal. So it's something that's of great interest to us as a body or as an organization.
Very good, very good. Yeah, I was stitched up in my WSET 3 exam. I still did all right in it. I did well. I was 20 years of age, and it was the first year in a very, very long time, from what I've heard, they actually stuck a port into my
Whoa.
WSET 3 exam. So that was good. My WSET 4 was almost easier than 3. It was great. Great. We might move on from there. Well done to everyone. It seems like a lot of you have thrown in your answers there, which is great. Lots of names going into the barrel. We actually have the correct answer as 3, Stalin, which is good.
Oh yes, Stalin's yeah, it's a great book.
Yeah.
We felt we couldn't answer that we'd be cheating because
Yeah.
one of the reasons that we're actually doing this tasting is that we've read this book.
Oh, fantastic.
Really? That's great.
And that's what made us think, oh, Georgian wine, that'd be fun to try some of those. So great book. Yeah. Stalin's Wine Cellar. Set in Georgia.
Story. Yeah, really interesting.
Great. We might move on to the third wine. Thanks, Andrea.
Yeah, so Sabaravi is perhaps all the Georgian wines, perhaps the best known in terms of grape varieties. So we actually grow Sabaravi in Australia. We have a few producers in the Barossa. So Domain Day is one of them. They have a pretty famous Sabaravi. Hugh Hamilton, I think, also McLaren Vale might make one as well. But Sabaravi is a red grape variety that's quite unique because it has pink flesh. So it's what's called a teinturier. So there's only a few red wine varieties that have red skins and red or pink flesh, which means that you'll get really deep color very, very easily from those grape varieties. And Michael, you've got your Excel spreadsheets popping up there. And so often with Sabaravi, you can expect high tannin, high acid, and it can be really unrelenting and quite astringent as a young wine. This particular wine is also from the Kakheti, so from that larger, more famous province in the southeast of the country. But it's been made with only a short amount of maturation and a shorter amount of contact. So it's a little bit more approachable, a little bit less tannic than many other Sabaravis you might encounter. So I'd be curious to see what you think. And I love the label of this wine too. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, great. We might grab Dave for this one. This sounds like it's in your role, mate, over there, looking at your cellar.
I haven't tried it yet. I'm just trying to get my head around the last 2 glasses that we just had, and certainly smells pretty good. I'm certainly going to enjoy this probably more than the last 2. Sorry for the disappointment, but
hence why I picked on you for this one.
For me, they were challenging.
Yeah.
Certainly the colour's quite nice, and the body looks pretty good.
Just gonna say, very different label. Did we get shipped the right wine?
Ooh. I'm not sure. Michael will be the best person to
You'll have to excuse me. I left my bottle on the other side of the room.
Yeah,
So
looks
I'm
like
actually
Alex
just
and
filling it
John
down.
got the same, yeah.
Yeah. I'm wondering whether did they send something else instead of, or did we have the wrong picture on the slide?
No, I think they've just changed the label, have they?
Oh, that's possible too.
Good chance, yeah.
Yeah, no, they've just changed the label. That's all it is. I do apologize for that. It should be the correct one. My one is, yeah, my one's the same as yours.
It looks the same on the description on the label.
Yeah. No, it's exactly the same. They've just changed their label. I apologize. We send these out to an external design team who do this, so they're not wine experts, and we should proofread better.
Any other comments out there about the Sabaravi?
It's quite tannic. It's what I'm finding. It's very chewy. I haven't decanted mine whatsoever, and I just had a really quick sip of it over there, and I'm still chewing. so that's good. Did anyone here decant theirs tonight, or?
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think that would do it an absolute world of justice, because I am finding this very nice and thick and inky, and I really think that a little bit of extra time will really make that open up and really vibrate the flavors quite a bit. I haven't tried this exact Sabaravi before. It's the first one that I've opened, but the ones that I've had in the past are usually a little bit more open than this. So I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. I see that Danny, you're getting into that one at the moment. What do you reckon, Matt?
Yeah, super interesting. I think it's quite, on first glance, it's quite light. But then, you know, the tannins and some of the acidity makes me think of a much bigger wine. I agree, maybe a bit of age or some breathing, but I'm quite liking there's a fair bit of complexity there that I'm enjoying at the moment.
I think a massive thick charred grilled steak would let's see, look, I can't even say charred correctly. I'm still chewing on the tannins. A big steak would really break through that, I think. That'd be great.
And traditionally, I think they would have that with grilled meat. That's sort of the traditional pairing in Georgia with Sabaravi. And because of those high tannins and high acid, you can age these wines. They will really reward cellaring. Even wines like this that have been only had a short amount of maturation, they still have quite a bit of lead time in terms of putting away their cellar.
Something like this, what would be your recommended decant time there, Andrea?
For this kind of really young wine, you could easily give it an hour and a half. I'm always reticent to decant really old wines for long periods of time, because they can go through their sort of really beautiful sweet spot quite early when they get exposed to oxygen, and then by the time you sit down to dinner and enjoy them, they might be on the descent. But with a young wine, you've got a lot of time. So, you know, an hour and a half with a wine with this kind of tannin and you know, tightly wound kind of structure.
It's actually delicious. It's a real foodie wine. I can see. Is that a typical? I mean, if we're looking at the most popular red wines that are consumed among Georgians, is this sort of up there? Because this is what comes over to us predominantly from what we've seen.
Yeah.
Is this sort of what their regular drink of choice is? For example, Australians, we love our Shiraz. Yep. You know, Cabernet and Merlot sort of get left behind a little bit there. Whereas over in Bordeaux, it's pretty much all Cabernet and Merlot dominant. What do they do over in Georgia?
Yeah, I mean, I think Sabaravi is one of the main grape varieties. It's grown quite widely, not only in Georgia, but in other parts of Central, Eastern Europe. And I think it's captured a bit more of attention because of its structural components, that high acid, high tannin kind of characteristic, which gives it such great ageability. And it's robust, so it can withstand minimal intervention winemaking, which is a good thing. I do think that they may make sweeter styles with Sabaravi that we just don't see here. So we do get the dry versions, but I think they are making some sweeter wines with this.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I would not have thought that, but yeah, I think, you know, what would we make that's sweet here, like Dolcetto? Yeah. Where does it compete in the market, which is pretty much less than 1% anyways, so it almost wouldn't be worth bringing over unless everyone changed over.
Yeah.
That's great. If anyone has any questions about this wine, please speak up. Please put yourself on mute. Feel free to ask a couple of questions. If not, then wouldn't mind having a bit of a chat with Andrea just about what's going on with Georgian wines and where you see them going.
Yeah, well, that's actually the big question mark, because although Georgia,
we've got Jennifer and David wanted to ask a bit of a question on that one.
Yes,
Marianne did.
David wanted to ask a question. Given it's got high tannin, high acidity, how long would you cellar this for?
Oh, easily, 10 years. I think with the bigger wines, with a lot of oak, which this one doesn't have necessarily, you could easily sell Cellar Sabaravi for 20 plus years. So it would perform in a very similar way to sort of Barolo in Italy, or Aglianico in the southern Italian wines. So that structure is very robust. Yeah.
I'm not finding a lot of tannin in it. I do get the complexity, but I don't think there's that much tannin in there actually.
It's
I agree
interesting.
with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
putting it towards like a Grenache in terms of body.
Yeah.
So somewhere in that medium plus sort of body in terms of palate weight, or even as Danny said, like a bigger New Zealand Pinot. But then I'm getting like really grippy.
Not Felton Road.
No, but then some really grippy and chewy tannins that I'm just absolutely loving.
I don't get the grippy chewy tannins at all. But anyway.
Yeah, well, this wine has only had a very short amount of, time on skins, so that would explain it. And I think that's an unusual style for Sabaravi. So this is a more early drinking, approachable style. But having said that, I still think you could keep it for quite a while, particularly because I think the tannins sort of sneak up on you towards the back finish of that wine.
Yeah, I think they really do, unless we're drinking different wines.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. What this reminds me of a Clare Valley Shiraz. I just have to say, like the nose and the sort of structure of the wine. And it's a really good thing. I'm not getting huge tannins either, but the acidity is there and the flavor is great, right? So yeah.
We decanted it for quite a while, and
Yeah.
we're having it
Couple
with
hours, yeah.
pasta.
Perfect. Yeah. No, I think that would work well. And anytime you're also eating with wines like that, then the tannins seem lesser as well, because if you're just having it without anything, then you sort of see the pure tannin profile. With anything, particularly anything protein based, you'll sort of get a synergy happening in your mouth, and those tannins and protein will kind of bind together, and you'll get a more supple mouthfeel. So
Yeah, really enjoying it. Yeah.
yeah.
It's a good wine. I can't wait for it to sit in my glass for another half an hour. It should be good.
We decanted ours a while ago, and I must admit, when we first tried it, I thought the most reminiscent it was a Tanat. It was really quite grippy on the tannins, but in the 20 minutes we've been sitting here talking about it, it has softened a little bit on that. But really enjoying it. Looking forward to the lasagna that we're going to have with it in 5 or 10 minutes time.
We'll try and keep to time for you. I can't guarantee.
Wait is required.
We've got a reputation of going over time here, and everyone drinking, having a bit of fun. Yeah, cool. If there is any more questions, please do yell out. We've got Andrea with us. She's a master of wine. She's very, very willing to answer any questions that you've got about this region. But I would love to have a bit of a discussion about, what's happening at the moment with Georgian wines. They're most of their biggest exporter, their biggest exportation was wine into Russia.
Yeah.
So where do they sort of sit on the fence with that?
Yeah, it's a huge problem for Georgia because they do depend on Russia for their volume of exports, not necessarily their value. And Georgia is independent from Russia, and there has been a lot of bloodshed between the two countries. So they are not really wanting to support Russia in any way in this terrible war with the Ukraine. So they will have to be looking to move that export to other countries. They also exported to the Ukraine, so they're kind of having a double whammy there. But they have been enjoying some double-digit growth in terms of export sales to the US, to Canada, to the UK, and to greater sort of Western Europe. And I expect that we will start to see more and more Georgian wine appear if they can get access to market as well, because they are in a pretty dicey region at the moment. So even logistics and things might be a bit tricky with the current situation to the north of them. You know, they've got so much to offer. They have a huge amount of different grape varieties, as I talked about before, and they'd love to be able to commercialize those and sell them, but that's a very difficult thing to do as well, to educate the wine buying public. They're not easy to pronounce, they're not recognizable, so there's a huge sort of marketing job there. And there's still a lot of modernization to occur within the industry as well, in terms of getting you know, the right kind of equipment and logistics in place to become a more better organized exporter, you could say. But they've definitely tapped into some of the great sort of wine critics of the world. They've got a lot of support amongst masters of wine dotted around the globe as well. So I think if they can get the logistics piece sorted, we'll probably start to see more Georgian wine on all export markets, at least in the West, while they try and kind of recoup their losses from what they would normally sell to.
I hope so, because I want another iteration of that Pheasant's Tears. That's unreal.
Yeah.
No, that's really great. I mean, you talk about marketing new grape varietals, and I mean, we've seen it. Pinot Grigio has only just started to take off because it's become second nature for people to pronounce. You're looking at newer varietals like Atsitska from the Barry guys, and a few other different interesting varietals that are being planted throughout Australia just to suit our climate. And really adapt to that. And it's really hard to market these new brands when people don't know enough about them, when there's so many noble varietals that are already ingrained in our culture. You're looking at Shiraz, Cabernet Merlot, Pinot Noir, it's already there. You know exactly what you're getting. It says it on the tin. Sabaravi on the shelf, I don't know what I'm going to get. So
yeah,
I mean, just looking at it through a consumer's lens, yeah,
isn't it? Yeah, and but I think, you know, there's a lot of interest in Australia domestically with some of these Georgian varieties. We have them planted, that we are producing these. So, and those you will find under screw cap, so you can kind of compare some of our local local producers with those varieties and what's happening in Georgia. So I think it's something that will grow from here quite significantly.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Just be mindful of a little bit of the time here. If anyone's got any questions, I will answer them as soon as we finish. Andrea will answer these as soon as we finish this quiz. I'm just going to put the wheel of names here because my screen was sharing the wrong tab before. Let's see if this works. I've just got to add in a couple of the answers here from the previous questions. Has that changed the screen again, has it, or is that right?
No, you're all right. Yeah.
Okay, very good. Let's make sure we've got this right. Got a couple of answers. While I'm chasing this up, do you want to maybe talk about the modernization of the industry?
Yeah, look, I think it's a kind of paradox, because on one hand, Georgia has produced a reputation for resurrecting ancestral methods of making wine and really being at the forefront of the natural wine movement. But at the same time, they actually do produce a significant volume of wine, and a volume of wine that can be made in more modern ways, much more aligned with what we do here in Australia. And in some ways, I also think that would make them more palatable, or have more I should say wider access to export markets if they're making more conventionally made wines. So for them, it's probably a delicate balance of trying to maintain their street cred with the natural wine movement and with a sort of view of ancestral wine, but also building upon that to modernize and have, you know, stainless steel tanks, you know, refrigerated logistics, and really producing, you know, bright, fresh, crisp, lively, more conventionally made wines, perhaps, that will also find a home in export markets. So there is a willingness to invest in Georgia, but I think the geopolitics and its proximity to Russia at the moment is making that a little bit difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, I've got all the names into the hat now. I'm just going to hopefully have this as sharing my screen. Is that right? Can everyone see that? My very complex wheel of names. This is a fantastic website. Thank you very much. Free. And there we go. There was one entry that had a mobile number that we didn't have on file, and in conjunction to that, I could not. You did not leave your name, so I do apologize if you didn't get any entries there. But the winner is Danny. Hey, have a cheers, Danny.
Whoa!
Cheers. Thanks, guys. I couldn't have done it without you.
Well done, and thank you for coming, mate. Much appreciated.
What's the story behind the photo between Andrea and Ali?
Oh, that appeared on, I think, the United Sellers Instagram. I finally actually got to see Ali in person after chatting to him on United Sellers webinars and debating with him for the last couple of years. I was over in London for the awards ceremony for the new Masters of Wine in March, and so we had a brief catch up at the ceremony. So that was great to see him in person.
Absolutely. I'm just going to highlight the next couple of events that we've got on in our office. On the 7th of June, we have our Tuesday tutorials. They run on the first Tuesday of every single month. This month that has just passed has been actually tannin in wine, which is interesting because I got a lot of tannin in the third wine. Which was a fantastic tutorial. The next one is the 7th of June. Then on the 9th of June, we have our dinner, which is a Torbreck-led and run rig release dinner. You can find that on our website. And then also on the 23rd of June, we have a Tour of Europe fine dining tasting. I'll be putting all these details in an email for you just so that you've got them. We want tonight for you guys to relax, and then I'll just send you an email. And if you want to have a dig into them, you absolutely can. It's not a problem at all. Much appreciate you're all coming, and if you've got any questions, please do ask them. We're always very happy to answer. We've got Andrea with us at the moment for another couple of minutes, and then being mindful of your time, Andrea, we'll let you go.
That's all right. No, it's been an absolute pleasure presenting. It's really exciting to see Georgian wines getting so much interest from all of you out there. It's not just the sommelier set. There's obviously a lot of curiosity and interest out there, which is fantastic. So I hope this is the first of many tastings.
Yeah, I'm hoping so. I see Alison and John had their hand up for a question.
No, mate, that was a clap.
That was a clap.
That was a clap. That was.
Yep.
Is that for Danny or for us? Or for Georgian wine?
We can do a thumbs up if you like. No problem at all. Thumbs up's quite good.
Very, very good. Glad to hear that the Zoom novelty is still paying off. I love it. I'm still a rookie myself. Very good. Any other questions? If not, thank you guys all for coming. We much appreciate it. I'm going to finish off this glass anyways, which has a tiny bit left. Thank you for coming, Andrea. Much appreciated. Your wisdom's always great, and your knowledge in wines. Did Pete have any last questions before we go?
Just some Ukrainian wine.
Yes, I think it's very appropriate. We try some Ukrainian wines.
Yep, absolutely. Let's put it on the table, Pete. Let's do it.
What are you doing?
When are we going to do Hungarian wine?
Wines, great idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They certainly need some support. It's actually just a matter of logistics. Trying to get the wines out of the country at the moment.
I'm already
and we can all wear our yellow and blue t-shirts.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm already curating a charity pack at the moment, Pete, which would be good. And 100% of the profits actually go over to the charities. So I'll be sure that you're all well aware of that. But yes, it is a cog in the works, that's for sure. Great. Well, thank you for coming, everyone. It's been much appreciated. All those that want to sit by while I finish my glass, you're more than welcome. I'll be sitting here in the Zoom meet. Otherwise, thank you so much for coming. Much appreciated.
Thanks, everyone. Great to see
Bye.
you.
Thanks, Andrea, and thanks to the United Sellers team. That was great tasting.
Yep, great. Thank you.
Thanks so much, guys.
That's super good.
Yeah, thanks, Danny. You were great.
Yeah, Danny, absolute legend, mate. You got an answer right. That's phenomenal. And you were first to answer it. Well done. What can I say? I gave you the correct amount of entries into the draw and you won. Well done. You didn't need the extra. If I got the extra, it would have shuffled and it would have offset you. You would have lost. So I did you a favor.
Hey, Chris got answer 1 right as well, by the way.
Oh, was that the number that was not in there?
1% of the thingy-mabob. No, he was in. He was in.
Oh, he was in. Oh, very
That's
good.
right.
Doesn't matter.
Danny won fair and square.
Danny won fair and square,
Really?
and I
Like, yeah.
definitely put you, Chris. I definitely put your name in the
No,
correct
he
number of
was, he had
times.
lots of
Yeah.
entries. Luck of the draw.
Yeah.
Oh,
No, I'll tell you
that's-
that orange wine, really impressed by that because I usually hate them. You go to restaurants, they try and sell them to you. It's like, nah. But I like that one. Very textural. The tannins were awesome, but they were good in a good way, right? And yeah, the savoriness of that, but still having some fruit was
But
awesome wine.
we have to admit, we actually opened it last
Yeah, we
night.
opened it the night before, right?
Yeah, so it's had time to, because it was quite sour, I think, the first night.
Yeah.
And we
just-
didn't have it with food. It was really sour. It's like, ugh.
Yeah.
And tonight it was good with food. Yeah, it
Really
was
surprised.
good.
That was good. Yeah.
I find it's really spicy. Like
Yeah.
I get a lot of spices coming out of
Yeah.
that wine, a lot of ginger and like, I don't have it with me at the moment, but I remember it because I've had it plenty of times.
Yeah.
I get a lot of like tangerine peel and skins. But yeah, some really interesting characters coming out of it. Just having it straight out of the fridge is probably not the go. Because it's really thick. It's a white wine that you sort of need to approach kind of similarly to a
I
red, but
think it needs
cooler.
the food, like the people who are having it with the cheese and the muscatels, I think might be
Oh,
a good
yeah.
Oh, that'd
balance,
be awesome,
you
yeah.
know, like if it was like a sharp cheese and a muscatel, maybe.
Oh yeah, for sure. Let me find out how to turn off the recording and then we can continue chatting. So the file size isn't 10 million megabytes. More.